This video is really serious, and whoever you are that are watching this needs to pay attention. It has to do with the UN Firearms Treaty that President Obama signed. Now, a treaty is not really a treaty unless the Senate votes to ratify it. But I've been kind of looking at this thing on the periphery. Well, today I was advised that not only now is the treaty put out there and signed by a lot of countries, what the UN has done is now decided they were going to institute enforcement without consensus. Now that means they're going to start making life difficult for countries who have not ratified and or who are not abiding by the standards of the treaty. Now there's a second document regarding the standards. I'm going to take you through the important parts of that and why you should be as alarmed as I am. Because as soon as I finish this, I'm getting on the horn to my entire congressional delegation from my state to let them know how I feel about this. Keep watching. Thanks. Now, the document is from the International Small Arms Control Standard, or ISACA, version 1.2. And it's fresh off the press, April 22nd, 2016. The UN program that's managing this is called CASA, Coordinating Action on Small Arms. Now, keep in mind that the people who wrote this were not people in the United States, but our UN ambassadors have signed up to this with the approval of the presidents that were involved. Now, none of the countries in the world understand America and America's Second Amendment. And this document really shows that. It also shows who the key players are trying to force the United States through UN bullying, and that's what it is, to pretty much administrate and regulate the citizens of the United States away from its Second Amendment responsibilities. This is dangerous stuff. Now let's go and show you why. Now, this is the glossary of the same document that we've been looking at. What's important is the word shall. So I'm going to point out some of the shalls, and wherever we see shall in this whole document, it indicates a requirement that must be strictly followed in order to conform, and no deviation is permitted. Keep that in mind as we go through some of the shalls that are part of these standards, and that the United States, if the Senate approves the treaty, will have to be forced to implement. Serious stuff. Now, in this document, the document itself is not complete, but what's important are the things that are bolded, as you see here. Those areas are complete. And we're going to go and focus on the legislative and regulatory series, specifically the the regulation of civilian access to small arms and light weapons. Now, for you boys and girls that don't know what that means every firearm that American citizens are legally able to own, possess, and carry today. All small arms, with the exception of .22 caliber rimfire, and light weapons. Light weapons is considered a .50 cal or semi-automatic higher caliber rifle. So before we get into the rules that they're saying every nation or state in capital letters should follow, let's look at this first paragraph because it is really important to understand. It talks about 3/4 of all small arms in civilian hands. That's true. Mostly they are used for legal purposes such as hunting and sport shooting. Notice, self-defense is not a legal purpose. That's important. The UN does not consider self-defense a legal purpose for owning any firearm. Further, small arms can be everyday working tools for civilians involved in activities such as subsistence, professional hunting, agriculture, forestry, species management. Notice self-defense isn't in there. Pay attention, boys and girls, it gets even better. The second paragraph is even more fun. It talks about some civilians hold small arms illegally. The country decides what is legal and what is not, right? Then it gets to the concept that a civilian possesses a weapon or a light weapon prohibited by law. The United States does not prohibit civilians from owning and possessing those type of firearms. More importantly, this document says possesses more small arms than the law allows. The first important concept here is that the UN and the rules that they're saying to support the treaty says that every nation that supports the treaty must by law limit the amount of firearms and ammunition that a civilian can have. It gets better later on, right? And do not possess a license required for the weapon or weapons that they hold. The concept here is that no civilian should own any firearm unless they have a license for that firearm. Pay attention to that. That violates every concept of the Second Amendment of the United States. And when you listen to any politician who goes after gun rights and gun ownership, they are playing out of this playbook. Stay tuned, there's even more. In this paragraph, it talks about inadequate national regulation and small arms and light weapons illicitly going across borders. But it then goes to the concept that it's essential that regulatory mechanisms are in place to ensure that privately held small arms are legally owned and used, and that civilians are held accountable for their legal possession. Now, what that means is that the laws would have to be changed in this country, which would violate the Second Amendment. It would require a national registry of every firearm sold and a continued link between that serial number and the new owner if there's a transition. That's what this means. Having fun yet? Okay, let the bullying begin. This is to us, the United States, right? Just read it that way. Under international law, states, read that as the United States, are obliged, means you must, exercise due diligence in the regulation of private actors. That's you and me, including protecting the citizens, that means those people who don't have guns, against violence and the threat of violence. Here it comes. Regulating civilian access to small arms and light weapons is an essential element of this state responsibility. United States of America, you are not doing your job. Get rid of that Second Amendment so that you can control and limit and eliminate all civilian access to firearms. So here's where some politicians who are saying, this treaty is no big deal. And they go to this sentence in this paragraph. It is the prerogative of each state to regulate civilian access to small arms according to its own culture, historical experience, and constitutional requirements. Right? But don't forget, up here it says every state is obliged to exercise due diligence. So you guys in the United States, that Second Amendment, even though it's part of your culture, experience, and constitutional requirement, you're not exercising due diligence, so we're going to be in your shit as much as we can and bring the heat on you as much as we can. Having fun yet? Now here's where they try to really squeeze down and define what the laws should look like. In this case, this is right into the gun control crowd's library of messaging. Achieve a balance, recognizing legitimate legal use of small arms by civilians. Define legal use, right? We know what that is in America. And the document provides guidance to minimize the risk of small arms being misused by civilians. What does misuse mean, and what does minimize the risk mean? It gets better later on. Civilians who possess small arms are those unlikely to misuse them, so your laws must guarantee that. Your laws must ensure that small arms are possessed and used, quote, for legitimate purposes. Sound familiar? In our country, the Second Amendment is our legitimate purpose. And here, item J, is the coup de grace, or coup de grace, right? For you to speak French like I do. Ensure that the levels of regulation are proportionate to the types of small arms possessed. In other words, there should be a sliding scale. It should be more and more difficult to get certain types of firearms. What this would mean, and I'll show you this, the table for this, is that unless it's a .22 pistol, a civilian shouldn't own it. And it should be very, very difficult to get anything above a .22 pistol. That's where item J takes us later on in this document. Okay, here's where it gets really dangerous, and we need to be screaming our fool heads off at our elected officials. Because now this talks about categorizing small arms according to risk factors. National law shall, that means the law of the country of the United States, shall group small arms by type into distinct categories according to level of risk that each type would pose to public safety if misused. Now, we don't do that in this country. However, if we sign up to the treaty, if the Senate approves it, the country would have to adopt a sliding scale definition of small arms to be owned by civilians. Now, it says this: the prerogative of each state to categorize small arms according to its own perception of risk in light of its own historical, cultural, and constitutional context. There is no way that once the treaty is signed that we would not adopt a scale-based authorization for firearms in this country. No way. Okay, so here are the risk factors that they want our law, if we approve the treaty, if the Senate approves the treaty, our law to deal with. One is the action. Is it manual or semi-automatic? Caliber. Smaller the caliber, the better. Whether it's intended to be rimfire or centerfire. Rimfire would be less regulated. Centerfire would be more regulated. Here it comes, boys and girls. Capacity of the magazine, and the ease with which the arm can be concealed on one's person, barrel length, and overall weapon length. That gets to pistols and short barrel rifles, which are legal in this country, right? So, the legal classification, this is where it starts to dictate to us what our new laws would have to say if the treaty was signed. First, in order to define properly, national law, that's our law, regulations and administrative procedures shall say, A, the maximum number of rounds any magazine can hold is 10. Where do you think that whole 10-round magazine bullshit came from? It came from the UN and that treaty. B, the magazines capable of holding more rounds than a low-capacity magazine are to be classified officially in law as high-capacity magazines. We do not do that in this country, but this treaty would demand that the United States do that. Here's a good one. This gets at the length of the barrel and the rifle. The barrel length and overall weapon length with your small arm we classified as a short barrel weapon or short barrel rifle should not be less than 46 centimeters. Now let me do the conversion, right? That's an 18-inch barrel. Any rifle with a barrel less than 18 inches would be illegal according to the treaty. I have a 16-inch AR. Get the fuck out of here. How many illegal AR platform and AK variant rifles out there are 16 inches or less than 18 inches, but are not classified as an SBR according to our NFA rules? Come on. This is serious stuff. Serious stuff. This is right out of the UN document. We can't have this. We can't have this. No. Now, I'm just going to let this focus on this table, because this is how the UN is suggesting categories be made. For those of you who are not familiar, this is almost exactly what Canada has and Australia, sound familiar, and other countries in Europe. Just read that for a minute. I'm going to leave that there so you can read it. And for you shotgun aficionados, how would you like to be limited by law to 3 rounds in your shotgun? By the way, that's Australia as well, and most of Europe. Okay, I'm going to go on. If you missed some of this, just rewind the video and come back to this table. Now, here are the legitimate reasons in this document for a civilian to own a small arm according to this document. The usual suspects, oh, look at that. Somehow, self-protection showed up. However, national law and the appropriate national administration can determine what type of self-protection that is. Again, our Second Amendment makes it very clear that our self-protection is not only against direct dangers to us as we walk around in the world, but also against a tyrannical government. Okay, this section talks about which civilian is prohibited from having a small arm. I'll just scroll through here because this blah blah is very similar to what we have in this country until you get to item F. Item F, right? The person has been certified by a qualified medical practitioner. What? Is that some psych tech? What? Qualified medical practitioner as having a mental disability or illness that is incompatible with the ownership or possession of a small arm. Man, you ought to be, your hair should be on fire looking at that, because that is not what our current law says. But according to this UN document, we would have to do that. We would have to enable that in our law. So some yahoo who has, he woke up or she woke up having issues that morning, decides to declare you, that's right, you, having a mental disability. Remember, you can have a mental disability or disorder in this country today and still purchase, own, and carry a firearm. What you can't is be, by order of a court, put in a facility for a person with psychiatric disabilities or illnesses, been confined. We do that today, right? But a certified, qualified medical practitioner who can just, on their own, with no vetting at all, and even if it was vetted, that's just wrong. You do not want a person, because then is their personal judgment. That's the crap that went on in Florida. And that's why it was right for Florida to overturn and make sure that doctors, an individual doctor, couldn't declare you incompatible with ownership or possession of a firearm just because they felt like it or didn't think it was right. This is serious stuff. You need to be paying attention. Okay, here's one that ought to get your hair on fire again. This is the rule that should be law for the safe storage of firearms. And here it says, when not in use, a small arm must be, according to law, stored. Here we go. Unloaded, separate from ammunition, out of reach of children, got that, on a premises that offers protection against intrusion, which may not be your house, in a sturdy, locked storage unit, defined by what? It can withstand 15-minute attempt forced entry. But here's the deal. If you have a firearm and it's for self-defense in your house, how stupid is it, because there's some people that want to have it unloaded, separated from its ammunition while you're sleeping? So what defines use? Use means ready for use, not in your hand. See? See how this works? Get on the horn, man. Stop calling people. Okay, so for you poor people like me, here's what you would have to do. You would have to buy a gun-safe locked storage unit, not one of these small desktop things, right? But cannot be readily removed due to its weight, size, or being attached to a heavy immovable object. Come on. Who wants to have one of those things? Who has the space for it? Now, before you can have a license, and that's me, by the way, you have to have a license to even have the firearm. You have to have a license to buy one, and you have to have a license to possess it. Today, that's not the case except in some stupid states. But let's talk about the time frame, right? In this case, safe storage is a condition of getting your license in the first place or having it renewed. That means that a national authority can come to your house and verify that you have safe storage. Yeah, now it's getting real. Okay, here's the deal right here. This is the law for transporting and carrying firearms if we sign the treaty. This is in the document. Civilians shall not be permitted to carry a small arm in public, either open or concealed, unless in connection with a legitimate use with legal authorization. Right? The Second Amendment does not constitute, according to this, legal authorization or legitimate use. Right? The state, in this case the country, not a state in the United States, but the country may designate specific places or areas where civilians are not permitted to transport or carry. This disarms the American public right here. And this is what a lot of states are fighting against. How about this one? And then I'm done, right? In this case, the laws under this document, these rules say civilians may be permitted to own more than one small arm under a single license. National law may set limits on the number of small arms that a civilian may own at any one time. Number limits will vary across risk categories. This cannot happen without national gun registration in this country. Are you paying attention? Are you paying attention? Right? We cannot and should not, and we should consider it treason for any senator to vote to approve this document and this set of rules that would be forced down our throats. Now, when you get to the medium risk category, now what cranks in is a limit on the number of ammunition rounds that you can have at any one time. Come on, get on the phone, call somebody. Section 11.3 in the rules required for the treaty must have national registration that links a particular small arm to a specific licensed individual nationally. This is national firearm registration. This is what the treaty calls for. This is what the rules demand be in our legislation if we sign a treaty. Right? Now, the link to this document will be posted down below. Read it if you don't believe me. I just took you through the salient points that I got really concerned about, and I think you should be concerned about it too. Once you do that, or even if you just believe what I'm telling you in this video, forward the link to the video, share the video with people, right? Hell, read the document yourself, make your own video if you want to do that. But get the word out. This is serious stuff right here. We cannot let this happen. So, thanks for watching. Carry on.